Welcome to a very special edition of the Reporters Square Table presented by Lending Tree. It's our Draft Day edition. We're also the lead to the Hornets Draft Experience presented by Lending Tree that you can watch on Hornets.com right now or on the app as you're on there. Follow us along. I'm Matt Ruchinsky. I'm being joined as always by Sam Purley from Hornets.com and two amazing guests today, repeat guests. I think our first repeat guests on the show. We've got Kyle Bailey back from WFNZ and Rick Bonnell back from the Charlotte Observer. Great to have you both, all three of you actually. Sam, I see you every day. I don't get to see these guys as much, but great to have all three of you guys on here. And we finally made it, guys. It's draft day. We actually can do this. How excited are you, Rick, to finally actually cover the NBA draft again?
You know, it's been such a strange experience. When the NBA did that really hard pivot, when we were talking about, you know, late January, maybe even February for the season start, and all of a sudden, you know, Christmas Day becomes this thing. I remember thinking from having covered lockouts in the past, oh, this is just going to get frantic. This is even more frantic than a post-lockout in that, you know, in a lockout season, the draft still happens on time. I think it's absolutely amazing that in the span of 3 weeks, we are going to go from draft to free agency to training camp. It's unprecedented.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. We can get to a little bit of that later. But Kyle, for you on the radio, how excited are people right now to know that, hey, here it's draft day. Things are actually going to happen. We're finally moving on into 2020-21 for the NBA season.
Yeah, I mean, the listeners on our station have been very fired up about this. And I'll echo what Rick said about this being a impacted time frame and, you know, how frenetic it feels, but also just generally exciting because obviously Hornets have a huge opportunity with the overall pick. And then you factor in some, you know, trade rumors here and there. And it feels a bit like normal, even though it's a different time of year than we're accustomed to. So my listeners have really enjoyed this. We're having a lot of fun with it on our show. And can't wait to find out what we're reacting to tomorrow morning.
And talking about reacting to, the first time we had a chance to react for this draft was during the lottery when the Hornets made that jump, went in looking at 8. I've been here for 14 seasons, going on my 15th, never seen us move up. Rick, that means I've been sitting there next to you and never seen us move up. What did it mean, Sam, for you to see us move up from 8 to 3, and what kind of expectations does that put on for our fans right now?
Well, obviously, I think the word that comes to mind that we've talked a lot about was exciting. And that, again, feels like a long time ago. I think it was mid-August going from 8 to 3. And it's made the fans excited. I think, you know, the more you can talk about, okay, who you're going to get in that top 3 pick, who could, you know, there's so much more moves and maneuverability and things you can do with that pick that kind of frees up everything. You trade up, trade down, you know, trade out of the draft, you know, who knows, things can happen. But, and just being kind of part of the natural conversation, I think it's been cool for Hornets fans to hear themselves, you know, hear the Hornets talked about as getting one of those really top players rated in the draft. So been very exciting, and I can't echo enough how ready I am for the draft after months of articles and mock drafts and interviews. Let's just get to it.
Kyle, for you, do you think it drove more interest around this team when fans started to hear, hey, they jumped from 8 to 3? It just seemed like people started to get on board more and more and more as they started looking at what our options were.
Oh, without question. I mean, everybody here knows it's the highest draft pick since 2012, and it felt like, at least from some portion of the fan base, they felt like there was nothing but bad draft luck coming their way after several years of frustration. So to jump from 8 to 3 and to know that there's still talent at the top of this draft, it spurred a lot of conversations on my show and on our station, and people are genuinely fired up to find out what happens and what direction they go.
You know, Rick, you've been covering this team for a while, as we were just talking about. When you see a team do something like this, make this kind of a jump to get to a top 3 pick, how important is a top 3 pick for a franchise, especially in a draft like this, when people are saying that there are 3 guys at the top?
A few years ago, actually, when you guys were still Bobcats, we at the Observer did a series of stories where we did a database search about how the top 100 players in the league got there. I found it really interesting that our research showed that through about the 5th or 6th pick of a draft, there's a real relationship between where you pick and the likelihood of that guy becoming a significant NBA player. After about the 10th pick, believe it or not, it becomes totally random. You are no more likely to be an impactful NBA player as the 10th pick than you are being like the 50th pick. So you cannot afford to miss these opportunities. They're rare and they're very, very significant. As Mitch said, on lottery night, you expect somebody picked third to be special, to last 10 years as a starter.
Do you still think that would be the case, Kyle, right now when you look at things? Obviously, this is going to be a game-changing draft for the Hornets.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
I would agree with much of what Rick said. There was an interesting look at, I think Tom Haberstroh did about a year ago, that there had been, increased uncertainty. You'd seen some teams missing a bit more at the top, and that kind of runs counterintuitive to what we think we know about the draft because there's so much more data out there, more tape, more film. The scouting process is more sophisticated, more in depth. But the truth of the matter is, as Rick just said, when you get these top three opportunities, you need to hit them because this is where you'll find the best talent. Even if there's no clear-cut, definitive number one player in this draft like a LeBron or a Zion Williamson, it's unquestionable that somebody, at the top of this draft is going to be a superstar. It comes down to, can you evaluate, can you scout, and can you make the right decision when that time comes? And I think the Hornets are well positioned to do that.
And I want to go back to something that Rick just said about what Mitch said after lottery, that these were game-changing type players that would be available at a top three pick. So when you look at that top three pick, we've heard Mitch talk quite a bit about drafting for need versus drafting for talent. He says we need talent on this team. There is no doubt about that. But do you guys agree, Sam, if you're Mitch Kupchak and you're entering this draft and you're at pick number 3, are you trying to add something for talent or are you trying to add something for need at this point?
I mean, I think the consensus is you have to go for talent when you're a 22-win team. Although in an abbreviated season, I think you got to have guys in there. And there's no guarantees, particularly this season with the fast turnaround in the training camp. Injuries could be higher. Learning curve could be higher for rookies. Free agency, you don't really know how that's going to play out. Factoring COVID, too, it's going to be kind of a crazy year. So I think just getting as much talent as you in there and getting guys. And I think another good point is when you have guys at multiple positions or say you load up, it brings out the best in guys when they're fighting for those starting minutes or fighting for those rotation minutes. We've seen that in the past with this team is that brings out the best in guys. So I think talent and, maybe if you're in a situation where it's a coin flip, maybe if you got two guys kind of even on your board, maybe you lean towards fit. But I think at number 3, I think you just got to go best player available and you can figure it out later how he fits or you can trade him later, something like that, if he really doesn't fit positional wise.
We're going to go all around on this one. Rick, what do you think? Would you go talent or need at this point?
Well, I'll put it this way. I've asked Mitch that question probably 5 times. And when I mean that is he and I had that discussion before you guys moved up from the 8, 9, 10 range to 3. I thought it was, it's interesting when Mitch was asked right after the season ended to name what he thought their areas of need were. I thought it was really interesting that he said it's not positional, it's collective talent. I would argue that you guys are the least starless team in the league. You've got a lot of decent complementary pieces. You don't have anybody to build around. So I totally get Mitch's point that you have to value talent far above positional balance at this point in the rebuild.
What about you, Kyle? Is it the same aspect you would take?
Yes. I think Rick made some great points there. And I've heard Mitch say that several times too. I think, as we've talked about before, and I talked about a bit yesterday, it's absolutely the right approach to go for the best player available. I also happen to think that this is a year where the best player available may also fit their positional need. Where you got a couple of big men in James Wiseman and Onyeka Okongwu, who I look at as 2 very, very valuable, attractive pieces in this draft. Ultimately, I don't know where they'll go, but I do think best player available is the right move. I also, again, think that best player available might intersect with what they could really use on this roster. So I think it could work out for them very well.
And Rick, when you look at this, is it just a matter of the teams in front of us are going to make our decision for us when you're picking 3rd in this draft?
No. I have no doubt that there will be a conversation at some point before the first pick is made that Mitch is going to find out what the real cost of moving up to 1 or 2 would be. 3 days before the draft, you're not going to get the other team's best offer. I do think that he is motivated to do that. I have reported for weeks that I think that Wiseman is the top of their board. I think that Edwards is number 2 on their board. And I think that they're going to make a concerted effort to get Wiseman. That's just my instinct.
Overall, when you look at this team, you guys, we talked about drafting for talent, drafting for need. When you look at this team last year, Rick, you did a good job, talking about what this team is, how it's compiled. But what do you think of the strong points of this team where maybe you don't need to fill those areas as you go further in the draft to fill these other positions? What do you think are some of the areas that the Hornets actually need to fill in with those second-round picks?
Is that for me?
Yeah, sure. We'll start there with you.
Okay. I think that when you look at the situation, by far the things that they most need is they need more depth. They need depth at center. They're in a situation where Cody's going into the last year of his contract and the other 2 centers are free agents. We don't know what's happening. That's going to have to be addressed because easily the most significant concern coming out of last season is they were dead last in the NBA in defensive rebound percentage. That has got to change. I would expect Mitch to address that in free agency if he doesn't address that in the draft. The other thing, as JB has said, his system, there's never enough shooting. I am guessing that somebody like Joe Harris would be the home run swing as far as if they do anything in free agency because he'd love to have more shooting. Shooting creates spacing, and spacing is everything in the NBA.
Sam, for you, you've been watching this team for quite a while now as well. What do you look at as we enter this draft and say, hey, it'd be great if we could pick up some of this coming out of here?
Well, I think Rick hit it right on the head. You just need depth. You need guys that can fill and that can play multiple roles positionally, shooting, scoring. I mean, you can never have – we talk about positionless NBA now. You just need guys that can do multiple things. I think one thing they excelled at really well last year, and it's not exactly like as tangible as like rim protection, thing like that, was clutch time. I mean, they did a great job last year of putting themselves in position to win. I think they were 5th in the NBA in clutch time net rating. So not exactly a tangible attribute to, this guy has great clutch time, but, finding guys maybe that have been in high level programs in college, have played a lot, that have a lot of experience. Maybe it's something like that to kind of factor in. But, and again, kind of piggybacking on what Rick said, I think center, at least just looking at the roster, is something that will have to be addressed just strictly on numbers. And again, defensive rebounding and finishing at the rim. They're a bottom 5 team last year in field goal percentage at the rim.
Yeah, collectively just finding folks who can rebound, whether or not they're bigs, whether or not they're wings, whether or not they're guards, I think is important for this team to grab some more boards as we head into 2020, 2021. When we look at this too, obviously we've all watched what Mitch Kupchak has done. We've all talked about it here. We've seen since he's come over to the Hornets, not only what he's hit on in the first round with picks, but in the second round with picks, Devontae Graham, Cody Martin, Jalen McDaniels. Mitch, when you talk to him, he'll give all the credit in the world to Larry Jordan and the scouting staff over here at the Hornets. But at the same point in time, this is still Mitch's show. When you guys see what Mitch has done, why do you guys have so much confidence in Mitch's ability to work with his staff to find those gems in the second round? I'll start with you, Kyle.
When you go back to Mitch's time with the Lakers, that was a pretty impressive run. He wasn't often picking in the top 5, top 10, or even top 15. And Mitch had to work. Mitch had to go beyond the board where they were ever really consistently expecting to pick and to find talent. And whether it was a guy like Patrick Beverley or something along those lines, he's done it consistently throughout his career. And now he's in a spot where Charlotte's very much not L.A., but Mitch is he's older, he's wiser, he's confident in who he is, his process, and what he does. And you can hear that when you speak to him. I think he's just got a proven track record as you talk to people around the league. And I've talked to a lot of guys that played with him at Carolina who remained close to him, who just said Mitch has always had an eye for who can play and who can't. And that's not something that just comes easily and inherently to everyone. So when it comes to Mitch watching film or going to a workout, I trust that he knows what he's watching. And to your point, be it Devontae Graham, who did have some first-round grades on him, but Mitch wisely snapped him up, or Cody Martin and Jalen McDaniels, who I think, we can't argue that he's accomplished much yet at the NBA level, but I loved what I saw out of him last year when he did get on the floor. So I'm as confident as you can be in a general manager going into a draft that at the very least he's going to find someone who can really play basketball.
What about you, Rick? Why do you have such confidence in Mitch, and why do you think our fans have such confidence in Mitch as we enter into our next draft because of what he's done in the past?
Well, I mean, I do think there's a small sample size here, so I don't think we should jump to any conclusions in any direction. I will say this. I think that the organization is much better organized than it was before. I think that there was a lot of dysfunction, quite frankly, at the end when Rich Cho and Steve Clifford were here. There's no question Mitch is in charge. There's no question that JB and Mitch and Michael are on the same page. I think it's a much better organizational chart than it was before, simply as far as a level of communication. Everybody has to be, organized and trust each other and be able to disagree with that, and walk away feeling like everybody was heard and yet coming to a final decision. I think Mitch has a lot more power than anybody in recent memory has had as general manager, and I think that's not insignificant to what had to happen to get this right.
How much more, too, Sam, when you look at this, is that trust and that belief in each other that Rick is talking about? How much has that had to factor in this time of this hiatus and in the time of COVID? Because this was a different draft process for these guys, but when we talk to Mitch, you hear how ready these guys were and how prepared they were despite the changes. And we know that, Sam, heck, you've talked to probably 48 different draft prospects at some point in time via Zoom. I think Sam's got Zoom fatigue right now. I'm not really sure how he's actually on this call with us. So what do you think from that, Sam?
Well, last several months have certainly tested it. As like everybody else, communication has been a challenge. But the draft process did not start when the season ended in March. It did not say, oh, there's not going to be an NCAA tournament. There's not going to be any more college games. Let's start looking at film. This starts, I think Mitch even said it last week in his availability. They're already starting on next week's draft in 2 weeks. Like, that is a year-round thing. And I just think Mitch, and to kind of fall back on last question, Mitch just genuinely loves this. I think he loves the grind, the flying to California and watching a Stanford Cal game to see one potential second-round pick. I just think he loves it. I think it's hard to have had the success that he's had without loving it. It's going to Europe, it's going to Asia, going to Australia. He just loves it. I think he loves the grind and having everybody on the same page and knowing that you have a guy that's that invested in the process, I think trickles down to the rest of the organization.
Rick, you had mentioned earlier about the centers and free agents that we do have available. We're going to be bringing in 3 new picks. There's going to be some cap room, more flexibility maybe than we've had in the past under Mitch. Do you see there as being a better opportunity to improve this team even more heading into this season than there might have been in the last couple of years because of some of that flexibility? I'll start with you, Rick.
Oh, there's no question there's a confluence of opportunity right now. It's not just that they have the 3rd pick. By the way, let's keep in mind, because we haven't mentioned this, they don't just have the 3rd pick. They have the 32nd pick and the 56th pick. I thought it was interesting the other day when Mitch mentioned that he likes the fact that their picks are spread all through the 60 picks, that it has, pushed them in the direction of being super comprehensive in their draft prep. But they're going to have about $20 million in cap space. That's the first time that's happened in ages. There is a real opportunity for change. Maybe not immediate. They're not going to go out and, bid crazily on name free agents, but there's a chance to really make an impact, whether it's trading, taking on a bad contract in return for a future draft pick, whether it's going after a complimentary free agent. I expect him to be very proactive the next 2 weeks. And there's a real opportunity here that, quite frankly, hasn't existed the way the cap's been the last couple of years.
And Kyle, what opportunity do you see as well for the Hornets? Do you look at this and go, hey, man, this is kind of exciting to see, and we'll actually get to see some things shaking up a little bit maybe?
Oh, absolutely. This is something that I've been harping on. Rick and I have had a lot of on-air discussions about this exact thing. And, I touched on the most important points there, that it's not just the 3rd overall pick. The 32nd pick, for all intents and purposes, I don't like to change the definition of things. It's still a 2nd-round pick, but it can be looked at essentially as a late 1st rounder as well. And it has pushed them to be more comprehensive in their draft prep, and I love the way they're looking at it. So between that and the cap space and the possibility of bringing in a Joe Harris or just shooting in general and some depth in the front court, they have a chance to really transform this roster in not just a meaningful way, a significant way, that, again, may not pay dividends in the first 3 months that we see it, but could become pretty, later in the season, that they've made a big jump from a roster and talent standpoint.
We've talked about the way things have changed as well, and everything has been compacted with the draft and free agency and trades. Number one, Rick, are you getting any sleep at this point in time, or are you consistently on those phones trying to figure out what's going on? Because you talked about how this is at a different level. Can you just talk about, from your standpoint as a reporter, how much of a different level you're seeing this at right now as everything is amping up?
The last few days have been very, very difficult that way. And, everybody who covers a major league team has alerts on their phone. What I'm saying is, when certain national writers tweet something out, my phone beeps. Beeped a whole lot last night, and I'm just glad none of it washed up on the Hornets shore. It's frantic. It's going to get more frantic. Let's keep in mind, prior to yesterday, we're taping this, on Tuesday. Prior to Monday, there had not been a trade in the NBA in 9 months. That's a lot of pent-up demand. I'll tell you, it's just like motors are revving. People are ready to go. We've already seen the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns dramatically make over their rosters, and that's just the beginning.
And as Rick said, he is right. It is just the beginning. Sometimes we got to tape these ahead of time just to make sure we get them done for our fans out there on the right timing. When you guys are watching this right now, we're not sure what might have happened in the last 24 hours. Let us just put that out there. We could be talking about something that's already happened, but that's the wonderful thing about taping these things live, right? There you go. Kyle, you got to deal with that kind of stuff as things change in a heartbeat too. But right now, how excited are you just as we enter into those final moments before the draft?
Oh, I'm thrilled. I love the NBA draft. I have since I was a kid. I love it, just as much as I did then right now, for different reasons, obviously, and doing what we do. But it just represents new opportunity, a chance to continue to change for the better. And obviously the fans are just so thrilled about having a top 3 pick. And that as much as anything has been incredibly enjoyable for me as someone who gets to be, gets to have daily conversations with this fan base here in Charlotte and to feel that energy and that excitement and their willingness and eagerness to talk about the possibilities and what they'd like to see happen. I just love that energy that's in the fan base right now, and I can't wait for us to, again, be able to react to something tomorrow morning.
What about you, Sam? I want to get your take. You've been going through this whole thing with us. I know that it's been a lot of tireless nights for you, tireless days, but how excited are you to finally hear with the 3rd pick, the Charlotte Hornets select
I'm thrilled. I'm going to delete every single 2020 draft file off my computer, every interview, every article, all gone. Just save the one for the 3 guys we get. Overall, I just think I'd like to harken back to my first point. It's exciting. I think it's been a long time since this team has done anything in the sense of it didn't get to play in the restart. It's been, had the moratorium and trades. just to have people talk about the team and, hey, you know what? The Hornets, they had a good thing going back in March, and they're adding this player and that player, and we're going to get going in a couple weeks. I think it's a good way to kind of, it is a short turnaround. It's going to be pretty crazy the next couple weeks flying into training camp, but I think this is going to really serve as a good spark to get that season going, because usually you draft in June and then you got to wait. Well, you have summer league usually, but you have to wait 4 or 5 months to get to the regular NBA season. Not the case. Or you're going to draft a guy and you're going to see him play probably within a couple weeks. So that's really cool, I think, for our fans.
Despite the chaos, Rick, you got to love this at this point in time, though, because it's definitely keeping us active as we see what's going to happen and what's going to change with this team.
That's true. I will tell you something else that Mitch said the other day that I think we need to keep in mind going forward. This guy who was the 3rd pick is going to come in here without the benefit of summer league, without the benefit of a 3-month acclimation period with the Hornets assistant coaches. Basically, by the time that he finds a place to live and signs his contract, training camp's about to start. We do not know how this is going to affect this rookie class. I thought it was really interesting that Mitch, even though he didn't think it was, more likely than not, he really broached the possibility that third pick could spend some time in Greensboro because, as Mitch said, they're really going to err on the side of caution. They don't want to see somebody get hurt or have their development undermined by being thrown into the pool too fast.
That is 100% correct. We're going to see things escalated at a very rapid pace in the course of the next 2 weeks. So everybody get as much sleep as you can. Drink that coffee, drink those energy drinks, whatever, keep us going because we know we're going to need it. Really appreciate you guys joining us. We're getting ready to add these pieces. I'm excited to see what happens now as we get ready to start and the NBA draft gets underway. Please make sure to stay on and join us on our Hornets virtual draft experience presented by Lending Tree. For Kyle Bailey, for Rick Bonnell, and for Sam Purley, I'm Matt Rachinski for Hornets.com. We'll see you next time.